Hello, everyone. It is Antoinetta Mosley, and I am so excited today. We are here for episode 35 of Conversations with I Follow the Leader, Overcoming Pregnancy Discrimination, Multi-faceted Motherhood with Mary Grace Gardner. I am so excited for you to meet Mary Grace. She is phenomenal. She is a businesswoman, she is a mother, and just an amazing person. So, thank you for being here today for episode 35 Overcoming Pregnancy Discrimination Multifaceted Motherhood with Mary Grace Gardner. Mary Grace, I'm going to do your introduction, but hello, how are you today?
Oh, I'm doing so well. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you so much for being here. And for those who are listening or watching, I want to let you know a little more about our subject today. One of the ways discrimination shows up in the workplace that is not often talked about is actually pregnancy discrimination. In this courageous conversation, we of course put courageous in quotes because our goal is conversations like these will go from courageous to commonplace in the next 5 years. So we're really grateful for guests like Mary Grace who are willing to have the conversations that aren't often had aloud about these subjects. And so Mary Grace is an MPH, she's a corporate transformation leader, multi-passionate entrepreneur and speaker who helps ambitious change makers achieve personal and professional goals with ease and joy. She helps her clients design the life they want without limits. What a powerful description. And I can attest, I've seen Mary Grace in action. She is phenomenal. During our conversation, we're going to discuss pregnancy discrimination. And Mary Grace is being courageous today, and she's going to share some personal anecdotes about her experience with motherhood and how it's benefited her personally and professionally, despite encountering discrimination, unfortunately, along the way. She's used these lessons as a catalyst for her career. And before we would get started, we of course want to define what is pregnancy discrimination. And so that legal definition is treating a woman, an applicant, or an employee unfavorably because of pregnancy, childbirth, or medical condition related to pregnancy or childbirth. So, hello, Mary Grace. Thank you for coming on to this courageous conversation. How are you?
I'm doing so well and actually really excited to be talking about this topic because it's not one that's oftentimes talked about before. So thank you for creating this space.
Of course. And so we shared a little bit about you, but are there other elements that you would like for the audience to know as we set the stage for today?
So a little bit more about my background. So like you mentioned, corporate transformation leadership. So primarily focused in the healthcare spaces. And my MPH is actually in maternal and child health and international health. So that just adds some additional color to the experiences that I've had and the additional background that I have regarding the situations that I'll be sharing.
Awesome. And tell us, because you are a mother, and you are about to be a mother again. So if you'll tell us the context for our audience, just a little more about you as a mother.
Sure. So I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. I have boys, and then I have a third on the way. I'm actually 36 weeks pregnant as of the recording today. So we're welcoming baby boy number 3. And so as I've been going through my pregnancy journey, it also has coincided with me climbing up in my career, launching businesses as well. And oftentimes I know women struggle with that perception of, can you still have children and be present and still do the things in your career or your business that you want? And my experience has been the answer is yes. And sometimes these setbacks might come up. And so I'm glad that we'll be able to talk about that today.
Yeah, I love that. Yes, and right, acknowledging that unfortunately this is happening to so many women in the workforce. For context, for those listening, I am not a mother, but have experience, right, when I was in a role and asking about short-term disability, etc. Very uncomfortable situation. It wasn't something that ended up happening, and that's really hard, right? I was at a director level position, and just starting to think about family and knowing, wow, I wouldn't have the benefits, right, to take time off. And so I think it's really important. This conversation is not just for mothers or people like me who want to be a mother in the future. It's also for those who want to be advocates and allies for those who want to, right, have a career and be mothers, or have a career and adopt, whatever that looks like.
I think it's so important to highlight because in the interactions that we have in the workplace, there could be such small interactions that can happen when speaking with a parent or someone who wants to become a parent. And it can create an environment that isn't inclusive if we're not careful with the type of language we use. And even though there are laws that protect this classification, it's still quite easy for employees or employers to accidentally create spaces that are not inclusive of a diverse work environment.
Agreed. And it's so prevalent. I can say through our cultural audits that I follow the leader, it's something that comes up most often, is feeling like I can't leave to go pick up my school kid from school, etc. I think the pandemic in some ways has helped with a lot of that, but it's also hurt a lot because we saw so many mothers leaving the workforce. And so I want to talk a little more now about your personal experience, because I think, right, this is so common, but it's not talked about. I've talked to a lot of women right behind the scenes or through these anonymous surveys. But tell me a little more about your experience as, right, trying to become a mother and then in the beginning, and then now being a mother and being multifaceted and having all of these different goals and being able to achieve them. How did it start out? What was your experience?
Sure. Yes. I'll start off with the story of when things really shifted for me as a parent and going through that pregnancy journey. So it all started in the corporate setting when I was tapped on the shoulder for a promotion. And so for any of us working in corporate, we all know what it means to be tapped on the shoulder, right? You are internally headhunted for a position. And so there was a leader who I never thought of working for and was aware that there was a leadership opening on her team, but I never thought to pursue it. I was really happy in my current role. I was really happy with my boss and my team. So I actually never expected to leave that situation. It was just so wonderful. But I was tapped on the shoulder by that leader, and she had reached out to me to schedule a one-on-one to get some coaching on some things she was struggling with. And she ended the conversation with, "Mary Grace, I don't know if you realize that there is this leadership position on my team." And then she proceeded to spend a lot of time explaining why I was the perfect fit for the role, why my leadership was what she needed to create some transformation in her group, the reach that I could have. So she went through a whole list of why I was the right person and why she would be so disappointed if I didn't apply. I remember hanging up from that conversation feeling really flattered because it was totally unexpected. But then also it shook me a bit because, like I mentioned, I was already really happy in my role at the time. And in my role at the time, I had a phenomenal boss who herself, she was an exceptional executive who was one of the highest performers in the company, also raised two daughters along the way, which was very rare actually at the company for that level of leadership. And she was a wonderful example to me about work-life integration, parenthood, supportive environments. And so I felt like I maybe was in a bit of a bubble because at the company, it was very supportive of families, very supportive of women, of motherhood. And so I remember sharing with my boss at the time about this opportunity, and she was happy, sad, right? So happy for the opportunity and sad because she said, Mary Grace, as soon as you express interest, I know you'll be taken away, but this is the right thing for the company. I'm so excited about what you can contribute. So weighing the pros and cons, talking with my family, I decided, okay, I'll explore the role. So I reached out to the hiring manager. We went through the formal process, right? We want to make sure it was fair and equitable. So we had our initial interview, and she had said, Mary Grace, this is all formality. I know you're the exceptional candidate for this role, but we still have to go through the process and make sure that we make it fair for other applicants. So we go through our first round interview. She closes out and tells me how this confirms that I'm the right fit for her, and she wants me to move on to the next step, which was to meet with her boss. And so at the company at the time, it was not uncommon for when there's internal hiring processes for them to take a long time. She had warned me that there was a lot of fires that they were fighting, and to get the panelists that she wanted together would take some time. So I was in no rush, like I mentioned, happy in the role that I was in. And so at the time, though, I was also pregnant. So I was pregnant and thinking, okay, it's early enough in the pregnancy that if I decide to move forward with the role, I can lay some groundwork before going on leave and then come back and continue. And just historically, even with my third pregnancy now, each time it served as a catalyst for me in my career, where I just happened to have been asked to lead some major initiative or do something highly visible, and then ended up becoming highly successful. So I've had a track record of just being able to perform. So at any rate, it took a long time for her to assemble the next steps. And she had kept me abreast along the way of you're still top of mind. We just are really struggling with getting everything synced up, but don't worry, we'll move forward. And it finally came time for me to announce my leave, because I had to go, right? And so I had held that information for a while just so that I could we can go through the process, but it came to the time where I had to explain to her what was going on. So when I did, I fully expected support because of a couple things. One is our company was just so inclusive already, but to herself, she is a mother. She actually took extended leave herself recently to take care of a sick child. So I thought, of course, she'd get it. But to my shock, her response immediately when I told her was, that means you're no longer pursuing this leadership role on my team. And do you know those moments in time where, like on the movies, where things just pause and you
yes,
and you're like, wait a minute, did I just hear that right? So here I am in my office processing this response, which I did not expect.
Yeah.
And in a matter of half a second, I'm thinking about, my goodness, I can't believe this is being said. What in the world? That what came out of my mouth instead was, actually, no, I am not. This is not a reason for me to pull out of being considered. I'd like to keep my hat in the ring. And so I'd like to still be considered for the position. And so she said, okay, that's great. So it didn't sound like it was that big of a deal of a problem. But then when I ended up going on leave, I received an automated message from Human Resources that said, the position has been closed. So when that happens, usually that means one of two things. Either the position was filled or the position was taken down. So I forwarded the message to that hiring manager and just put one short question. Is this correct? ? And she replies with, yes, we decided to go with another candidate. I'll explain it to you after you come back from maternity leave. And so as someone who is a hiring manager herself for all sorts of roles, I know that so much happens in the hiring process, and perhaps there could have been a different candidate that fits. However, as the person going through the process, what was made visible to me was that I encountered a situation where I was pursued and told that I was the highest qualified candidate for the role, why I was a perfect fit. Went through the first part of the interview process regarding why, and I was told I was a great fit, mentioned I was pregnant, and then received that negative reaction. So if I were to connect the dots, it felt like a decision was made based upon the additional information I shared. So it was at that moment I had to take a pause and really think through, what do I want? And really question what was the best next steps for me.
Yeah, and for those who are not watching and are listening, my facial expressions throughout are telling my feelings, but I will voice them. I like to take notes, and so some of the words I just wrote down, right, from the outside in, listening to your story, and I've been able to hear it before, but right, just that shock and just all of the unspoken things that were basically said and done, right, to receive an automated message, and we're receiving a chat message, just thank you for sharing your story, I'm so sorry that happened. And unfortunately there's countless stories like that out there, right? And we talk a lot about this at the firm. The microaggressions, the discrimination, the prejudice often isn't loud, right? Often people aren't going to say, well, now that you're pregnant, you're not a fit, you're out, right? There's going to be these subtle things that happen that unfortunately sometimes make people feel like, is this me? What did I do? And so I just want to applaud you as well, because the fact that you were able to still say, no, I still want my hat in the ring. You were still able to advocate for yourself. And I can't even imagine that mental anguish. You're about to have a baby and then you're on leave, right? Still thinking, I want to be prepared for this new role, this new level of leadership. And to then be treated that way, right? When this was something that you were pursued for, I just can't imagine that mental anguish on top of, right, you're already going through a new time in your life.
It was shocking to me, right? Because someone who I had consistently received exceptional performance reviews, and this particular leader who wanted me to join her team wanted to continue to learn best practices from me and to implement within her group. And so it was just all shocking, right? And so when you take a step back, even just look at the statistics, when you're looking at the Department of Labor, almost 50% of the workforce comprise of women, right? And of those, about 85% of them will become parents at some point. And it's fascinating because if you look at from 2010 to 2020, there have been 50,000 cases that have been filed with regarding pregnancy discrimination with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and with the Fair Employment Practice agencies, but it's underreported. So I'm an example of someone who did not report it, right? Because at that time, and I remember having to think through, well, okay, now that this has happened, what do I do with this information, right? And it was at that time where I had to reassess, did I actually want this job? Do I actually want to make an example of what just happened? Because clearly what was presented to me could be interpreted in a certain way, right? And so it was really at that moment where I had to pause and reflect and say, is this actually the position that I want? What does actually career success, economic success, parental success look like to me? And so, yes, in that anguish, in that fury, I had to pause and say, hold on, before I just chase this goal, which I did not even want to begin with, let me redefine actually what does success look like for me at this moment. And I think taking that pause really helped me with figuring out my next steps from there.
That's so beautiful, and I want to acknowledge you and all of those women and those who are experiencing different things in the workplace or have in the past, like in your case, and didn't report it, because that is something, right? Especially those of us in the United States, we know that discrimination in the workplace is underreported because of retaliation. And something most people don't know, that retaliation is the number one complaint, right? So something happens and then an employee talks to someone, HR, et cetera, and then they're retaliated against. So that's actually the number one charge, is being retaliated against after reporting discrimination, which is really unfortunate. I think it's also important to note, right? It is 2022. The Pregnancy Discrimination Act was an amendment to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, right? So this is not even something that has been around for a long time. That was amended in 1978, right? So we just really have to think about the context, and also how can we create workplaces where everyone, including women, including pregnant women, including those who are adopting children, are celebrated and not tolerated. And right, your story is, I mean, basically it seems like, okay, you were tolerated, right? Okay, you're tolerated for being pregnant, not celebrated that, wow, we're going to have another leader, right, who's also a mother, right? Instead of taking that positivity and growth in your life and professional life, it's really sad that a lot of women feel like they have to leave the workforce altogether, leave the role, or not pursue leadership anymore. So, would love to hear a little more about how you decided to take this negative situation and use it as fuel for even more success.
You know, it's so, and this is the first time I actually have shared this publicly, right? Because on the public facing side, when I did announce my pregnancy to those who did know at work, it was actually received very well, right? Which is why there's this big dichotomy of my experience, because when I did, it was also at a time where I successfully launched a major initiative at work and was being asked to join all these other leadership teams, give insight. So it was very much a highly visible project that I was working on. And people were giggling, saying, I had no idea you were pregnant the whole time and you did all these things, right? And I, for actually all three of my pregnancies, I did not reveal them until 32 weeks pregnant, right? So I would let them know, because I was just on such a highly visible project on talking circuits. I just didn't want there to be a question of, when is she going out? I wanted to be able to demonstrate I could still do the job, right? So for this particular scenario, I was doing so well publicly, and then on the side dealing with this situation behind the doors. And for me, even personally, before I was ever pregnant with any kids, I remember just even for myself encountering an opportunity where I could be the person advocating for another woman, when another leader had come to me and told me that and this was earlier in my career, she had said, I just found this exceptional candidate for this role we've been hiring for. And she's perfect in every way, except she just told me before we made the offer that she's pregnant. And that means if I hire her, I'm going to lose her for a couple months. And I really am torn about it. And I remember looking at her and saying, I'm going to pretend that you did not tell me any of that information, because you know that legally we need to choose the best candidate regardless of pregnancy status. And if you're telling me there is no flaw at all, and the only thing is she's pregnant, you need to do the right thing. So I'm going to do you the favor of pretending you did not tell me this, and I know you're going to make the right decision. She ended up hiring her, right? And she ended up becoming a phenomenal employee. And it's those sorts of interactions that can make such a difference in creating an inclusive environment. And so when it turned to become my turn, and that wasn't done for me, that's where I felt like this is just a good example for me of the type of leader I want to work for, right? And so in turning this kind of situation around for myself, when I did take that pause, so in one of the businesses I have called Human Centered Reliability, there's a 3-step process called Pathway to Personal Mastery. So one is to stabilize, to sharpen, to optimize. So the first step is stabilize. So when you actually stabilize, it's figuring out, okay, what do I want? Am I living in accordance with that? So asking myself, was this the type of leader I would have wanted to work with? The answer was actually no, right? If someone could so quickly and not realize the situation they were creating at such a high level leadership, who knows what else in terms of environments they might be creating for their employees. So I felt like this was a saving grace actually to see this beforehand. But the second thing, while I didn't get the position, which by the way, was never filled. So that position ended up either being vacant or they just never, or that candidate never took it or whatever it was, but it was never filled for a year and a half. So I don't know what happened with that situation. I'm going to leave that alone, but it was never filled. So at any rate, I took that moment to reflect and say, okay, I did not get that position. However, what it did do for me was helped me to unlock this new perspective of possibility, right? It allowed me to have this moment to dream of what else would I want to do with my career? What else can I impact? And literally, once I kind of focused more on that, within weeks, literally weeks, other positions inside and outside the company just started opening up, and hiring managers were pursuing me for them. Positions where the titles were higher, the compensation was higher, and the bosses were phenomenal, right? And so I had, at that moment of low, I had no idea that weeks later would be such moments of high regarding just so much support and excitement. And some of these hiring managers were actually men who knew my situation, right? And were just so excited to have the possibility of me being on their teams. And in the end, I was able to accept an opportunity that was far beyond what that original opportunity would have been able to provide. And so while looking back, for me personally, that was a terrible situation to be in. And I'm still thankful that it happened, because it served as this catalyst for me to reevaluate what do I want, and then opened up doors to these other possibilities.
Thank you. I mean, so beautiful. And you just shared with us so many examples of courage in action, right? I mean, your decision to, right, turn that negative into possibility, your decision to challenge another leader when they were thinking about making a discriminatory choice. I just think it's so beautiful, just the amount of courageous decisions you made and how that's been a catalyst for you versus a hindrance. And I know there's a lot of people out there who are scared. I'm scared to speak up. I'm scared to say something, whether it's for themselves or others. And so would love if you can give those listening or watching just some encouragement on, if they're going through a similar situation that you went through in the past, how can they have that mindset that you did of turning it into possibility instead of staying in that low?
I think a couple of things. One is, personally for me, I have a very difficult time holding things in when I see something is not right. Right. I sometimes I'll be the person to say something, or be the person to call out, hey, that's not appropriate. Right. So I think just internally for me, it's hard not to say something. And so sometimes I might speak up when maybe others are feeling uncomfortable. It's just been wired in me to do that. But I think second for me, that's been super important, is aligning with people who are supportive of that environment. So one of the biggest catalysts for me around this is choosing who I work for that creates that sort of environment. I have been blessed, and part of it is blessing, part of it is intentional, choosing bosses who I know are advocates of inclusion, who are high performers. And I have to believe that some of their high performance is because of them having this lens on diversity, equity, inclusion, and creating these spaces. I have to believe that, because my experience has been all the bosses I've worked for who have had that lens, they have been phenomenal. So each time, even with that situation where I did experience that discrimination, I remember talking to my boss at the time, and I barely even had to explain the situation. She said, that is not right, Mary Grace, what do you want to do about it? Right. She highlighted it even before I had to explain the whole thing. She got it right away. So even working for managers or choosing managers who will have your back in that sort of environment, because if you don't, and I still encourage that people speak up even if they don't have that situation where they have that backup. And if you are able to select the type of people, the type of environment that you're going to be surrounded by, and I know the listeners here have such high value and have that option, right, to be able to choose. I would say that is such a helpful way in which to be able to feel safe in explaining yourself, because as I was even approaching this situation, there was a part of me when she asked me, do you want to keep your application forward? There was a little part of me that said, oh, maybe I should be saying, using this as an escape and say, like, no, I don't want. There's that little reaction in me, right? But the stronger reaction was, no, that's not right. Even if I didn't want this position, you can't have that be the reason. So I think part of that is what gave me the courage. And then thirdly, a thing I would say is that moment of evaluation, of pausing on the goal at the time, and thinking, is the way in which I'm going, the pathway I'm going down, is that in alignment with what I actually want? Is that in alignment with what my strengths are? And is that the type of environment I want to subject myself to? And so being able to then kind of see that with more clarity allowed me to make better decisions for myself and for my family.
Thank you. That is so beautiful. And before we end today, I know one of the conversations we had was really about for future generations. And so you're the mother of 2 boys, about to be 3 boys. And I know we talked about just the importance of you as a mother of boys, what you can do. So can you tell us a little more about the responsibility you feel that you have as a mother of boys?
Yeah, I teased my husband. I said, I think the powers that be decided that someone like me needed to help raise the next generation of men. So I think for my boys, for me, is and I'm transparent about all the things that are going on. They know about my career. They know mommy has businesses. They know mommy shows up to their soccer games too and has movie nights Friday and Saturday or Sunday nights with them and creates the space and prioritizes them. And they know, oh, she needs to have this time to speak with Dr. So-and-so for her job, right? So they understand that I can be there for them as a present parent and that I can still be ambitious with what it is I want to pursue, right? And so it's funny, they're small, but they talk about business things, right? I saw my son writing down like menus and pricing of like the future restaurant he wants to own, or my son writing things about his schedule and how he was fitting in different things in the day, right? So they watch you, and I want them to see that as a mother, as a parent, that if you could pursue what you want and you could pursue family as well and have that both happen. The other thing is my spouse is super supportive as well as I pursue these different endeavors. And he himself, as he's pursuing his endeavors, is also focusing on showing that kind of work-life integration. For example, he's a coach for multiple sports, but when one of our babies was just born, he was a soccer coach on the field wearing the baby on him in front of all these boys, right? So that they could see he's a father in addition to being able to coach them and make them exceptional athletes, right? So I think being able to demonstrate that is really important. And I think for your kids to be able to demonstrate that. But one other thing I want to share for employees who are listening to this, especially for those who might be pregnant women or who want to be parents in the future, is the notion that you can still achieve career success with children, right? If that's what you want. If you don't want that, that's okay too. I'm not saying that you have to, but if that's what you want, that it can be done. And it's a matter of creating your own definition of what your pathway to personal mastery might be, because what it might look like for you might be different for the next person, but defining that for yourself. And then for me personally, that meant that I wanted to be able to advance in my career and I wanted to launch businesses and I wanted to be a present parent and spouse, right? So for me, that's what it meant. And I encourage those who are listening who are, in the beginnings of parenting or thinking about it in the future, to define that for yourself. And then as you're pursuing your careers and pursuing the type of life you want, making sure that you're surrounding yourself in that type of environment that supports it.
Thank you so much, Mary Grace. This was such a beautiful conversation, such a critical conversation. We want to thank you for your courage, not only your courage today to be here and share your story, but the courage and action that you continue to display throughout your career that's not only helped yourself, but others as well. And so I just want to encourage people that courage is not always going to be comfortable. It definitely is not, but I believe courage is contagious. So for me, right, someone who wants to be a mother one day and who is also a CEO and does these other things, seeing women like you is such an inspiration and honestly makes me go, okay, I can, right, do this. I can have all the things that I want. And so I just really want to thank you, Mary Grace, for being an example of a woman who is doing it all, but on her terms. And so I love that you said you need to define for yourself. And so thank you for encouraging those of us who want to be multifaceted mothers one day. And I hope women out there, and again, advocates and allies, so even those who may not be pregnant or et cetera, or want that, I hope that you can take some of these gems today and know that the little things you do every day in the workplace do matter. Right? If you make a face when someone can't be there because their kid is sick, the policies and procedures you have in place, if you have short-term disability, those things matter. Your support as a spouse, as Mary Grace shared, matters. And so I really want leaders and change agents to think about that. It's not just the support of the mother, but do you have paternity leave? Are there policies, right, where it's not all put on the mother and all of the pressure is put on the mother to perform and succeed and do all of the things? So, Mary Grace, this was so beautiful. Thank you for coming on to Conversations with I Follow the Leader. We are going to link information so that our audience can connect with you. Please follow Mary Grace. Learn more about her. She is amazing. She shared a little bit about her business today. One of her businesses, but Mary Grace is a powerhouse. I have enjoyed getting to know you, and it's such an honor to have you on for the first time you're having this conversation aloud.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, so much for watching or listening or both, right? Because some of these conversations like this one, you just need to come back to. This is a great one to watch with your team and then actually discuss after how can we be better advocates for mothers. And so this was episode 35, Overcoming Pregnancy Discrimination, Multi-faceted Motherhood with Mary Grace Gardner. We are going to link to her so that you can follow her on LinkedIn, stay in touch with all of the amazing things that she is doing. We hope to see you this Friday. So we are having our second community conversation. And so would really love to see you there. For those who are watching, I am putting the information on the screen for you. It will be this Friday, so June 10th. You can register at ifollowtheleader.com/C5. And this is a community conversation for caring, courageous change agents. We had our first one recently, and it's just an opportunity where we were able to process the recent events. Unfortunately, we've had more mass shootings since our last conversation. And so we want to offer a place for people to talk about what's going on in the United States, what's going on in our communities, and just have a place to process that. So please, we hope to see you there. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. And be sure to stay connected with Mary Grace and just follow her success. And we love comments, right? We love to encourage those that come on. So please let her know how much you love this episode and if she was an inspiration to you. We'll see you soon.